Today on NewsWatch, superpower standoff. The U.S. and Russia are at odds over Russian airstrikes in Syria. Why American leaders are questioning Russia's motives. Plus, use it or lose it. We'll break down what that phrase means for your tax dollars. And today we're hearing from the pastor of Hillsong Church, Brian Houston. He talks about the up and downs of living, loving, and leading. And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. The Russian military descended on Syria with a vengeance, and President Obama has welcomed their involvement. The Russians say they are targeting ISIS, but their motives are now being questioned. Gary Lane has the story.
Russian fighter jets strike deep into the heart of Syria. But instead of hitting ISIS, the Russian bombers destroyed targets in Homs and Hama, cities where only U.S.-backed rebels are fighting against the Assad regime. This amateur video shows the mayhem and carnage left behind by the Russians. The Russians provided only an hour advance warning of the airstrikes. That potentially endangered American pilots already in Syrian airspace. President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry say they welcome Russian efforts to defeat ISIS. But while the Russians insisted they hit 20 Islamic State targets, including a command center, U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter questioned their motives.
It does appear that they were in areas where there probably were not ISIL forces, and that is precisely one of the problems with this whole approach.
So it now appears Russia has entered Syria only to help prop up Bashar al-Assad's dwindling regime. Some members of the president's own party are questioning the decision that gave Russia that green light to join the fight.
The problem with Russia is we do not trust their motives. They are propping up Assad, who is a barbaric and tyrant leader of Syria.
Some of the worst criticism came from Republican Senator John McCain, who said Russia has gained a foothold in Syria because of President Obama's retreat from the Middle East. McCain said there has been, quote, a series of decisions or non-decisions, which has led to the situation we see today, where Vladimir Putin may have inserted Russia into the Middle East in a way that Russia has not enjoyed since 1973, when the Russians were thrown out of Egypt. Several years ago, President Obama drew a red line over Bashar al-Assad's use of chemical weapons against his own people. Today, many Americans are likely wondering if this president has the will to draw another red line in Syria, this time against the Russians. Gary Lane, CBN News.
And Gary Lane joined George Thomas and Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell for some analysis and insight into Russia's military action in Syria. You can watch that roundtable discussion at cbnnews.com. There are new revelations today about a possible security breach from Hillary Clinton's email scandal. Evidence shows hackers linked to Russia tried to get into Clinton's personal email server, which she used while Secretary of State. It is unclear if Clinton clicked on any of the attachments they sent her, which would have given them access. The hackers tried at least 5 times. The news highlights the potential national security risk that Clinton took when she chose not to use a government email account. Millions of people on the East Coast are preparing for Hurricane Joaquin as it picks up speed right now in the Atlantic. It is moving towards the Bahamas with winds of up to 120 miles an hour. Virginia's governor has already declared a state of emergency as Joaquin is expected to speed up towards the Carolinas by tomorrow morning. Parts of the Northeast are already underwater. In Portland, Maine, many roads look more like rivers.
I came out probably an hour ago to move my car, and it was bad.
It's crazy. I've never seen this much water in one place.
In New York, it hasn't been long since many people rebuilt from Superstorm Sandy. They are preparing for flooding, power outages, and evacuations. CBN's Operation Blessing is on standby, ready to provide assistance during and after Hurricane Joaquin hits. You can learn more about Operation Blessing by going to ob.org. Well, news that Pope Francis met with Kentucky clerk Kim Davis is encouraging Americans concerned about the cause of religious liberty. Davis is just one person who stood up for her beliefs and suffered the consequences. A Washington state florist is also being punished for her faith. CBN's David Brody met with both of these courageous women to bring us their stories.
In the fight for religious liberty, two Christian women are standing out for their action and being considered heroes. Kim Davis, the Kentucky clerk who refused to issue marriage licenses to gay couples, and Baronelle Stutzman, a Washington state florist who would not sell flowers for a gay couple's wedding. Both paid a price for their stance. Davis went to jail. Stutzman faces lawsuits that could take her business and everything she owns.
Evangelical Christians see you as someone fighting the good fight. How do you see yourself?
Sinner saved by grace. Yeah, I'm not a hero and I'm not a martyr. I just try to be obedient.
Fortified by Christian support around the country and a meeting with Pope Francis, Davis says she's prepared to go back to jail if necessary.
Just people saying, that they've been encouraged, that their walk has been revived and they have been awakened and revived. And, I think, Lord, if this is all that comes of this, it's worth it, to get your church stirred and get the body of Christ revived and standing up again. And when I mean standing, I don't literally mean standing. I'm talking about standing on our knees in prayer, because that's where we do our fighting.
Critics call Davis a less than perfect messenger to defend traditional marriage. She's been divorced 3 times, but just recently gave her life to Jesus Christ. And she marvels at how God has used her.
You ever thought about that? Just how God is just using folks in all different ways, and folks that, it's all throughout the Bible, really.
I struggled with that myself. Why would God, of all people, choose me with my past to stand up and defend something that I had failed so miserably at in the world? And then I have to remember that I'm a new person, when I gave my life to Christ. His blood cleansed me, washed me clean, and the old has passed away, and the new stands in front of you. And yeah, I'm a very unlikely person to stand and to defend the Word of God.
Baronelle Stutzman warns Christians face a long fight because the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage is just the beginning of an assault on religious liberty.
I think it's going to get a lot worse, and it's just not, it's going to be attorneys that they say, you can practice law, but if you take a hate crime, then we're going to take your license. They can be television people like you that say, you can interview anybody or talk to anybody except for, and then you're off limits. So it's not just the florist or the baker. It's all the citizens. It's everybody's freedom. We're fighting for not just mine, but yours.
And that battle could be coming to a public square, a business, and a courtroom near you. David Brody, CBN News.
In another religious liberty case, the owners of a Portland area bakery are refusing to pay $135,000 in damages to a lesbian couple who they denied service. Melissa and Aaron Klein say they refused to bake a wedding cake for the couple because of their religious beliefs about marriage. In July, the Oregon Labor Commissioner awarded the damages, saying the Kleins had violated the women's rights by discriminating against them based on their sexual orientation. The Kleins say they're not paying because of financial hardship, but critics point out they have raised $500,000 in crowdfunding efforts. Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson has set new records for raising campaign cash. He hauled in $20 million in just the past 3 months, shattering records and setting a new bar for his Republican rivals. Carson raised $12 million in September alone, after he said he would not support a Muslim for president. He explained it's because Islam requires its followers to obey their religion over the U.S. Constitution. Overall, Carson has raised $31 million from almost 600,000 donations since he launched his White House bid in May. His camp says it proves the Republican establishment will have to take outsider candidates more seriously. You may think the term use it or lose it has something to do with fitness, but when it comes to government, if you're a taxpayer, use it or lose it means get ready to see a lot of your tax dollars wasted.
Libertarian Rand Paul can't stand big wasteful government and especially wasteful government spending, which is why he called this Senate hearing on end-of-the-year spending splurges. Government workers wasting cash they end up not needing for fear that if they don't spend it, Congress or their higher-ups might assume they don't need that money and so cut their next budget. Some both in and outside government feel it's almost insidious the way the government employees feel compelled to use it or lose it and spend any excess money they have left at the end of the fiscal year rather than handing it back. These budget experts told Paul's committee most government workers hate use it or lose it, but all the incentives are to binge spend the bucks rather than reveal you didn't need them all.
A recent survey said that 95% of federal employees think year-end spending splurges are a problem and do exist.
Why do good people do that? I think it's because of the incentive to actually have to spend the money. Well, let's not blame the people. Let's change the incentives, and that's how we can correct the problem.
The experts suggested to the Senate committee rewarding government workers who save and return money rather than threatening them with reduced budgets for their conscientious saving. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Coming up, a new discovery at an ancient gravesite in Israel. Why archaeologists believe they may have found the tombs of the heroes of Hanukkah. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says he is no longer bound by deals made with Israel. He told world leaders Wednesday at the United Nations he no longer has to abide by the agreements that pave the road for a two-state solution with Israel. Abbas's statements came as the Palestinian state was allowed to raise its flag at the United Nations headquarters for the first time. Abbas promised the Palestinian flag will be raised soon in Jerusalem, referring to Israel's capital as the capital of our Palestinian state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement calling on Abbas to act responsibly and answer his proposal for direct negotiations with Israel without any preconditions, adding the fact that time after time he does not respond is the best proof he has no intention of reaching a peace agreement. Well, in the Middle East, Israeli archaeologists may have discovered the tombs of ancient Jewish heroes known as Maccabees. They say a Byzantine Christian gravesite may hold the key. John Wagi brings us that story from Jerusalem.
There is a place of honor, of dignity to the Maccabean in Christianity. And we can conclude that ancient Christianity, like we, the archaeologists, seek the ancient tomb of the Maccabean.
While you won't find their story in the Bible, Netanyahu the Hasmonean and his 5 sons led a revolt against Greek rulers here about 160 years before Jesus. They cleansed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem from idolatry. Hanukkah commemorates their victory. The discovery is about a mile from the modern Israeli city of Modi'in, in the area where the Maccabees would have lived.
You can see behind me there is a burial niche, and at the bottom of it there is a mosaic floor. The fact there's a cross on a mosaic floor is not something we're used to finding.
That's because of its significance to Byzantine Christians from the 6th century AD. So why would the grave have been at this site? Archaeologist Dan Shachar explains.
The Maccabees, they removed the Greek Empire presence from what is now modern Israel, and they established an independent Jewish state. Which makes it significant both to Judaism and Christianity. The actual books of the Maccabees were canonized to the Catholic Bible and the Greek Orthodox Bible, the version, not in our Jewish Bible.
Archaeologist Amit Rehem suggests Byzantine Christians found the original tomb and redecorated it with the mosaic.
It will not worry me as an archaeologist to find unique cross like this here. It's a symbol, it's a clue that unique persons, figures, were buried here.
Jewish historian Josephus Flavius wrote about the Maccabean tombs in 2 ancient texts. He described them as impressive structures made of fine stone, surrounded by columns with pyramid-shaped roofs.
All the circumstantial evidence, the geographic, answer the descriptions of ancient historians like Josephus Flavius. There's a lot of evidence you could see plastered all over this rock, which tells us that very possibly there was something monumental on top of it, maybe something which answers the description of pyramids on top of it.
Shachar believes once they determine the importance of this site to the Byzantines, the Jewish mystery of the whereabouts of the Maccabees' tombs may also be solved. John Wagi, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, it was the worst day of his life. Find out what the founder of Hillsong Church shared with us in Studio 5 after this. If your church sings worship music, chances are there are a few tunes from Hillsong on the congregation's lips every Sunday. The Australian church has provided the soundtrack for churches around the world for many years, and that work is more than a dream come true for Brian Houston, who started the church decades ago with only a few dozen members. But it hasn't been an easy journey. Houston sat down with Ephraim Graham in CBN's Studio 5 to talk about the ups and downs of living, loving, and leading.
It's the power of love. More than 20,000 people attend services at Hillsong Church on any given Sunday, with campuses in Sydney, Kiev, Moscow, New York City, London, Cape Town, Paris, and so many more. And leading the worldwide flock is global pastor Brian Houston, who shares some of the journey in his book, Live, Love, Lead. Why this book? What made you want to write this book?
Well, I think the book's been in my heart for a long time. I have been pastoring for 32 years, same church, 40 years preaching and ministering, and I just felt like there was a lot in me I wanted to use to help other people, equip other people. So the timing right now just seemed to be the right time. I had the time to actually write the book, and so Live, Love, Lead, that's where I am. Houston and his wife Bobby first started Hillsong in 1983, meeting in a school hall and then a warehouse with only 45 members. It grew to 900 people in 4 years and continues to multiply. This church isn't the church you started 40 years ago. That's for sure. No, we started in a little school hall in the outer suburbs of Sydney. In those days, it was like green fields where we were, and we were in a small hall, as I say, and it is an amazing story. I mean, it's a miracle. Did you envision this? I remember reading, and you and your wife dating in a car that backs down into someone's house, essentially, because you forget to put it in park. Is this what you guys talked about all those years ago? We really could not have imagined all that God has done. My wife and I both grew up in New Zealand. The story you're talking about in the book is our neighbour who used to go to the tiny little Assemblies of God church we went to, had a very steep drive, and so we were parked at the top of their drive and just talking about the future and planning, and yeah, you got to read the book to see the rest. But I've got to tell you that we did have in our heart to serve God and to believe to do something significant, but the grace of God has been something we could never have perceived. What's been the toughest part of those 40 years for you? Well, I talk in the book about the worst day of my life. Mm-hmm. I was 45, it was in 1999. My father was my absolute hero. In fact, he was one of my great inspirations in terms of what I do today. And at 45, one of the guys who works for me came into my office, and we went through our normal list of things to talk about. And at the end, he said, there's just one more thing. And so the way he said it, the tone, I knew something was wrong. And he told me that we'd had a complaint come in that many years before that, probably in the 1970s, that my father had abused a young man. So, yeah, I mean, you couldn't hit me with worse news. It sort of hit me in layers. Mm-hmm. And so I had to confront my own father and ask him about that. So that definitely is the worst day of my life. How did that resolve itself? I can't even imagine navigating that. I don't know whether it has resolved itself as such. My father now has been dead for over 10 years, but the ramifications of that are still playing out right now.
What lessons did God allow that to teach you?
You know, one thing I do know is it wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong. It was my father. And, you know, in the world we live, there's some people who would love to try and frame me by my father's sin. But I refused to let that happen. But I guess it helped me to realise that everyone has their issues, has their battle, whatever that is. And that's why I think everyone is a perfect recipient for the gospel of Jesus, the grace of God.
Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders.
And with more than 40 recordings to their credit, music is a Hillsong signature. Their contemporary Christian praise songs are the Sunday soundtrack for churches around the world.
When many people think of Hillsong before they even think of the church and your ministry now, the music is so far-reaching. What do you think? I mean, are you a musician? What do you?
I was the church drummer when I was a teenager. Compared with the people today, no, I'm not a musician. But I always had a heart to pastor the kind of church that was an inspiration to churches. I'm a great believer in the potential of the church, and I mean the local church. And so I always kind of wanted to have a church where we wrote and sung songs that helped the church. And so it's an amazing thing because been through various personalities over all these years, but really from the start, it seems the songs from our church struck a chord with people, firstly in Australia, obviously, and then globally. And it's been a miracle story. Someone once said to me, Brian, you realise this is only a season. They're talking about the impact of the worship from Hillsong. And I agree, it's only a season, but so far it's been a very long season.
And finally, we end today's newscast with a message from Ephraim Graham that we hope will encourage you. Check it out.
It's time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I've spent days now in New York City looking at tall buildings, and I am just amazed at the creativity. But I want us to consider this, and consider this prayer. God, I am so grateful for the creativity you placed inside of me, because He's responsible for it all. And God, we give all the glory back to you. Make this a thankful Thursday.
And that is it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues that you care most about at cbnnews.com. And we hope that you'll join us next time. Have a great day.